Hi, I'm Paul Marynissen, Central Coast Council's Biosecurity Officer, back with another video on weed control and about weeds. Today we're going to talk about how you can control weeds around your house. A lot of people think weed control is really daunting, but a lot of people don't realise they've already got the stuff at home already. A lot of the stuff already at home to do it. So what we're going to do is, we're going to go through a few of the things that you can use in your garden. Some of the things may be a little unconventional, but they work. So, where to start from? I think one of the best places to start would be gloves. Before you start doing anything in the garden, you don't know what you're going to react to. You don't know what chemicals you might come into contact with out of plants. Some plants can cause skin irritations. So, always a good pair of gloves to start with. These are quite good, but don't rely on them for chemical use because they've just got mesh on the backs. But these are good for if you're pruning or lifting up leaves and everything. These will stop most spiders. I wouldn't worry about snakes because they're going to go through most gloves. The main thing is if you're gardening and it's a warm day, is make lots of noise and just keep an eye out for snakes. If you are going to be using chemicals around in the garden, these are the gloves you want to get. These are the ones that look like they've been dipped in plastic. These are coated in PVC, and PVC is impervious to all herbicides and insecticides. The main thing to remember with these guys is wash them like you are washing your hands before you take them off. A lot of people make the mistake of using chemicals, taking the gloves off, then start cleaning up. That's when you're at your most vulnerable. So wash the gloves first as if you're washing your hands, then take the gloves off, hang them out to dry, rinse them inside and out after you've rinsed off all your equipment. So 2 types of gloves. These are really not that expensive either. The next thing that you'd need if you're doing gardening around the place is a pair of secateurs. You don't have to go for real high-end ones, but I wouldn't go for the $2 shop ones either. They have a tendency, they do look the same as these, but they have a tendency to break because they're not really well made. So if you're going to buy secateurs, look at spending at least $20 or so. The next really handy thing to have around the garden, believe it or not, is one of these. This is a saw that's used for cutting plasterboard. These are really handy for getting into weeds where you're trying to cut out, say, the base of them. A lot of lawn grass weeds. Things like paspalum, you can actually get below the plant, cut through the roots, and these take a long time to go blunt. Some people just use a knife, but the problem with just using a knife is they go blunt really quickly in soil, particularly if you've got any small stones in there, they'll go blunt very quickly. This will actually push the stones out of the way and cut through the roots. So that is a saw that you use for you cutting plasterboard. These are cheap as chips at your local hardware shop. Another good thing to have is a folding handsaw. You can use the larger saws like bush saws. The only thing is if you're going to be doing a lot of gardening, having those there and the blade exposed all the time means that you've got a potential for bumping it or kneeling on it and cutting yourself. A great thing about the folding ones is when they're like this, the sharp bits are completely protected. So all you do with these ones is fold it out. I've been using this morning for getting a few weeds, so it's a little bit dirty, but normally I'll talk about cleaning of tools later. So you do that, it locks in place, wearing your gloves, and then you can cut through branches, cut weeds off at the ground, and so forth. And when you're finished using it, fold it back in, and you've got no risk of hurting yourself. Next we have is a gardening trowel. These things are invaluable. Getting down to the roots of long root plants like dandelions or cat's ear I should say. These are really good. These sometimes have a little blade indent at the end, so when you're going down, you can just push and you can slice through the roots on plants or getting under grasses and cutting the roots off, and they help loosen the soil to get some of the weeds out. Remember, when you're removing weeds, do as little movement to the soil as possible because otherwise what you're doing is you're tilling the soil for other weed seeds to germinate and come up, and then you'll end up with twice the problem you had before. The next thing is very handy, is some weeds, is just a knife. Make sure it's a nice sharp knife, and that's why it's really good to have a pouch that when you're not using it, you can slide it in and you're not going to cut yourself. These are quite good if you happen to do stem scraping for some plants like vine weeds. You can scrape the stem quite well and then apply any herbicide that you need to. This is where we get into some of the more interesting ones. These are called sponge tongs. Now, all it is a pair of cheap tongs from the $2 shop, a sponge scourer. You cut some strips off the sponge scourer using rubber contact cement, place it, glue it on the inside of the tongs, And these are really handy. If you've got scrappy weeds, for example, onion weed, what you can do is you get your herbicide, dip it in, wearing gloves of course, dip it in, squeeze off any excess, then what you do is grab the plant at the bottom, slide up, and you've coated both sides of the leaves at the same time, and you haven't had to hold your hand here and paint it on like a lot of the other methods. You haven't had to get any chemicals near your hands, but still wear gloves just to be safe. So that's good for that. The other thing these are really good for, if you've got weeds in amongst pot plants or in your garden, and spraying is a no-no because you're going to overspray and kill your garden, these, or you can get the longer barbecue tongs, dip it in, squeeze off the excess, reach in between your plants, do that, and you've coated them by both sides with glyphosate or any other herbicide, and they're going to die and you've got no overspray. So, sponge tongs. There is a video you can find on Council's Facebook page of me showing you how to make these. The next one is, we've probably all seen these at the shops. This is a dishwashing brush that you pop the end and you put your detergent into the handle, and then usually you would then wash up your dishes. What you do here is firstly mark it very well clearly that it's got poison in it and whatever chemical that you're using. Wearing gloves, these are about 50 mils, so what you do is you would actually make up about 50 mils of water. I always say if you're using these type of things, and also with the sponge tongs, if you're using chemical, add some food dye to it, just simple food colouring. That helps you to see where you've been and you won't do the same area twice. The other good reason you do that as well is if at the end of the time and you're using, say, red dye, and you've got red dye on your arm, on your forehead or anywhere else, you know that wherever you've got the red dye, you've got chemical and you're being a bit slack. It helps you to learn to be very careful with how you're using your chemical. So into something about that much, you would use 0.5 millilitre of something like glyphosate. And then what you do is make sure with the pair of gloves on that the sponge has gotten wet. This is great for weeds such as pennywort, which is the one that looks like little glossy lily pads that come up in the lawn. You can go along and just go dab, 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 and you're not killing your grass, but you're getting the weeds. It also works on flat weeds such as cudweed, cat's ear, dandelion, plantain, weeds like that. Very effective, one little dab, move on. It's like a very, very accurate weeding wand basically. But also if you've got a lot of the plant called pennywort, you can get these, you put your gloves on, slide underneath the leaf and you go like that. And the scourer helps to take the gloss off the leaf and apply the chemical at the same time. You're getting a 2 for 1. You get more chemical into the plant, you're going to get more chance of killing it down in the roots. Because with pennywort, that's where you've got to kill. The leaves will burn off with most chemicals, but you've got to get it down to the roots. And last but definitely not least, if you're doing a lot of this work and you are using chemical, but even if you're getting it amongst the plants in your garden, eye protection. I don't know how many times I've on these and I've felt a branch hit back and hit me in the face. I don't know how many times they've fixed my eyes, or saved my eyes, I should be saying. So, anything that you do with chemical, if you're doing somewhere where there could be eye injury, pair of these are really not that expensive. You get them at the hardware shop and they're going to save your eyes. So, with a whole range of those, there's one other little one that you can use as well is the bottles that you get for, say, hair colouring or perming solution that have got the nice little point on the top. Those, as long as you label them clearly with the chemical that you're using, these are really good for if you're doing cut and paint, which is a method we'll get to in another time, in another video. But these are really good for very small, accurate where you want to put chemical. And the good thing is that with these ones, these have got a screw top on the bottle that you can get. It means that just when you finish doing it, even if you've left it open and it drops on its side, you're not going to get more than one tiny drip every so often. You're not going to have it pouring everywhere. But you can also very easily, even with gloves on, turn it like that and it would be completely sealed. If you're using chemical and you're using undiluted chemical in one of these, don't forget, decant it back into the main bottle that you originally poured it from, and of course keep that somewhere locked, dried, dark. It'll keep it safe for you and from the kids. And the other thing too is when you're using this one, as you're making it up, you really can't decant it back in, but only make up as much as you think you're going to need for the day. If you've only got a little bit of light gardening work, only put a very small amount in the bottom, and if you've got a lot to do, put a bit more in there. But at the end of the day, we've always got those weeds around the yard that we can go around and we can use this on to get rid of them. So bear in mind, do this before you clean up and before you wash your gloves and anything else, then do the gloves. And that way, you're going to stay safe and you're going to have plenty of your fun years of gardening ahead. Thanks for that. Bye.